I've often heard it said as well that, obviously you're going to be kind of performing at times. There'll be some sort of drunk twat in the crowd who'll just shout like a random word and potentially kind of throw you off, and then that will kind of simmer down. Like, do you have any sort of like touch points or phrases in your head which will then bring you back into line so that the kind of script then begins to flow again? Like, does that happen much to you?
It's a good question. So like historically, obviously, I've had loads of hecklers, like any performer has when you've been doing it, as long as I have, or as long as you have. Especially if you're doing like stand-up comedy and stuff. Mostly not. Like these days, because I tend to do public shows that are people are buying tickets to come and see me. It's very, very, very rare, if pretty much not at all. I don't think I've ever had this happen actually. Really, if they're buying a ticket to come and see me, that they're going to be a dick because they've paid, right? Like they've already made a significant investment to have an evening. And they know the whole audience is on my side. Whereas if I, like, I'm at the Edinburgh Fringe, I'm doing like a late night cabaret spot, it's not my show, I'm just doing 5 or 10 minutes in the show, and maybe it's a bit of a rowdy night, then stuff can happen. And the way you handle that is like, the moment you get on stage, you dominate the room as quickly as you possibly can. I say dominate the room. I mean, like, because I'm not very tall, I've got red hair, I've got glasses, there's a lot of obvious things that you could attack me for visually. I ensure that when I get on stage, I don't want to say you're afraid to do that, but the reason I think people would do that is because they don't trust me to entertain them. They don't trust me to be in control of the situation. So and I think this is where, a lot of the sort of big confidence as a performer had to come from, is that like when I get on stage, I'm very used to very, very, very quickly making it clear to the audience, hey, don't worry, I'm good at this, like, which sounds kind of silly, but I think it's so vital, and I think it's like an element of the craft that's often underused, and like you've got to come on with this strength and this energy. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but like in terms of like, I don't like heckler put down lines. I've never really been that guy. I've got like funny lines, like funny lines, but like and they're just like classic. If anything, I try to not use anything anymore. Like I definitely don't use lines in my actual scripted shows. I'm talking about like comedy magic now, just because that's a place where that kind of thing will happen. But if someone drops a glass or something, just casually saying, "Oh, I did that with my mind." Just saying that very quickly, immediately after the noise. And that's a reflex now, just because it'll get a laugh, and it always does, which is a bit silly, but it's fun. It's a fun little bit of, like, business, so to speak. Um, so I've got, like, little moments like that, but it's very rare that I get anyone who's particularly aggressive as a heckler or something, or drunk. And if it's too bad, you get someone to get rid of them. Or there's once or twice I have, gotten people to leave the room, which is, uncomfortable, and you don't want to have to do it. But I'm comfortable enough with conflict now, and I trust myself enough as a performer to understand that if I, and it's very, very, very rare this happens. I can only really think of one instance I know this has happened. It's probably happened more than once, but there's one particular instance I'm thinking of where some people, like 3 or 4 people who were in the room, clearly just, I don't know why they were there, but I don't know if they didn't want to be there. They were just chatting, like chatting some shit. And I told them to shut up, essentially, in no uncertain terms, but within the character, early on. And they didn't. And then I just said, hey, come on, let's get you out. Now, that's awkward for everyone involved, right? They left, for sure. They didn't argue with me. They left. But it's awkward for the audience. And that moment in time, I've then got to, the moment I get back on stage, I need to, it's not about pretending it never happened. It's about, but it's also not about dwelling on it or acknowledging it too much, because, like, how do you acknowledge that? Like, what do you say to the audience that they don't already know? Everyone knows what that situation was. Like, you don't need to make a joke about it. You just go back into the world. And I think when it's, as it happened in that particular example, it was one of my scripted shows. Um, I was performing at a festival, though. It wasn't like anyway. But the good thing about the scripted show is I've got the script. So the moment that happens, the way to get back into it is, in fact, in the TED Talk, same thing. The TED Talk was a lot of dialogue, and I didn't give myself enough time to memorize it. And I delivered it, and there's a bit cut out of the talk where essentially I said something, and I didn't expect it was going to get a laugh. A mate of mine warned me. I read it out to him beforehand. He was like, hey, David, just so you know, that bit's funny, and you're going to get a laugh. And I was like, yeah, whatever. But then in the show, there's about 1,100 people in the room, which is probably the biggest audience I've ever played in front of. In fact, definitely is. The laugh was so big, or the room is built, because it was in the Sage in Gateshead. So like the room, it's a music venue, really. It's built for acoustics. So the laugh hit me like this wall, and I'd never experienced that before, like that scale of the noise, and it threw me. Like my brain I didn't expect it, and I couldn't remember my next line, and I don't want to say I froze. I didn't freeze. What I did was I just went quiet because I was trying to remember the line. And I was comfortable. I was nervous, but I was nervous because I knew I only had one take. But I'm not daft. Like, I knew that it was being filmed, and all I had to do was ensure that I stayed silent until I remembered the words, and then they'd cut it out. And I stayed silent because I was trying to remember the line. And then I realized it had been long enough that I needed to acknowledge it. So I said something. I can't remember what I said. Something like, "Don't worry, I've got this," to the audience. And that gets a laugh as well, because, it's kind of funny saying, "Don't worry, I've got this." Everyone kind of realizes. And then once I remembered it, I just calmly went back into it. And that's what it, like to the other point, like, the script is the savior. Like, the moment you can lose yourself in the words again, that's like, it's kind of like it takes you along like a river, like a ritual, you might even say.
If you enjoyed this clip, head on over to Locals to watch the full conversation right now. Supporters can access the video version, and everyone can freely listen to the audio-only version of the conversation. If you're on YouTube or Rumble, please like, subscribe, and then hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a new episode. I'll catch you next time. Cheers.